Hello everybody and welcome back to the 3-Hour News Show. You are now watching our signature segment, See the Stories. Now, I've been planning to go to Bali for my honeymoon, and I've just found out that there's some really fun ecotourism places and ecotourism activities to try. And I'm curious about where we can find out about them. Thankfully, I'm now sitting down with Suzy Hutomo, the co-founder of Ecotourism Bali, just so maybe I can find some places, find some activities for me and my future wife to try. Bu Suzy, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us here at See Today. I'm so excited to talk to you about all of this. But of course, as you know, Bali is a popular tourist destination. But can you explain what ecotourism specifically entails in the context of the Island of the Gods?
Okay, great. Yeah, I probably need to say a little bit more about what I'm doing. So my partner and I have something called Ecotourism Bali, which is actually we're a social enterprise that builds communities around sustainable tourism. So yes, we can recommend wonderful ecotourism activities, but on top of that, we have a assessment needs that we offer to hotels and restaurants to assess how sustainable their operation is, and they can gain badges according to their level of achievement. So that's our core mission, if you will, to help the tourism industry get on the path to sustainability and therefore help Bali become sustainable.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about some of these eco-friendly practices that are being implemented in Bali's tourism industry? Now, you mentioned earlier that you consult with companies and hotels, for example, to help them with that, right?
Right. So, as you know, Bali is a very popular destination, so there's a lot of pressure from being such a popular destination, and that's why we feel that a couple of things are important. Waste, water, energy, these are the three main components besides social inclusion and biodiversity. So the very important elements is about for instance, the kind of energy we use. We know that climate change is an existential threat, and therefore we encourage our members and those who are taking the assessment to look at the amount of energy they use and how they can go into using renewable energy. So actually, I'm happy to say that in Bali, quite a few businesses have installed solar panels, and in fact, the Bali itself has a few projects on trial. One in Nusa Penida with a lot of solar panels in order to supply the energy to Solar Penida, and probably if that works out, there could be more projects to turn Bali's energy source into renewables. So that's really a very positive step.
If I may ask a little bit about waste. So at the moment, obviously you've mentioned how Bali is taking steps to move towards renewable energy. Can you tell us in some ways that Bali, and particularly in the case of the tourism industry, how they are going to deal with waste in the future and how they're dealing with it now?
Okay, so waste is always an issue in tourism. If you look at the headlines, it's always an issue because there's so much plastic waste everywhere. So one of the things that Bali, as you know, is a pioneer in passing the law. So it's a real regulation now that there should be no plastic bags given out. There should be no plastic straws and no styrofoam. So Bali is the first province to pass this law. And this has helped Bali on the route to producing much less plastic waste. And the second problem is probably in the collection of waste. And there's been a lot of attention on that. And I know the government is moving towards building more recycling centers called TPS 3R. So these are the centers where they collect the waste, but they sort them, and then the recycling goes to the recycler. So you can, get much more viable recycling from this type of centers than the normal dumping ground, so to speak.
So, how long has this transition into sustainability been for the tourism industry in Bali, and how long will it take, would you think, before you are confident in saying that Bali is, let's say, 100% sustainable or 100% circular?
Well, I mean, the transition has started because tourists are demanding it. So one of the things that I'm very pleased to see is that international tourists are demanding that the places they visit should become sustainable. And big hotel chains are now under pressure to also become sustainable. But that also means that their waste has to be managed sustainably after it leaves the hotel as well. So the government is getting into the act. It's still in the early days. It's still the early days, I must say, because there's a lot of pressure from international tourists from everywhere, and then that causes the government to start to think about what to do. And now they're just starting, so it'll take a while. I think it'll be another 5 years at least that we get to a stage where it's manageable. I mean, to become truly sustainable, I'd say probably 10 years at this rate, at the current rate.
Okay, well, that's certainly not that far away. So I think there must be some optimism then, yeah, for Bali's tourism industry to be fully sustainable. I'm curious as well if it's had some effect on the costs and the price of certain services, of certain goods and services, because I know in some ways, because sustainability or sustainable products and sustainable services are still at their kind of early stages, and so the effects of economics of scale hasn't exactly taken into effect yet. So is it more expensive in some ways, or are goods and services that are sustainable, more expensive in some ways, or would you say they're kind of the same equal level of affordability?
I think it all depends on management. I mean, it's like, every restaurant should have good service, right? It really doesn't cost much more to train your staff to provide good service. And you can have good service in a warung or in a 5-star restaurant. So similarly, sustainability is it's a practice. It has to become the basic practice of the tourism industry, and therefore it won't cost more. But if the normal, the business as usual is unsustainable, and you need to, put in more facilities to redo what you had done to make it sustainable, then it becomes expensive. So it's really based on the management and the commitment. Because if you start from day one to design your processes or your products or your tourism trips, everything sustainably, then it will never cost more. At most, it may cost maybe 5 to 7% more, and that's not too much to justify the price. But it's not going to cost like 20 to 30% more, which happens when practices are not sustainable and you have to reinvest to make them sustainable. Therefore, it's very important to start on the sustainability journey as soon as possible.
It sounds very interesting, and I think it speaks to your commitment of just how important it is. But can you tell me, or can you give us some examples of some successful sustainable initiatives within the tourism industry in Bali that are already successful or are set to become successful?
Yeah, I think we have several projects. I mean, one is the big hotel, Apurva Kapinski. I'm sure you're familiar with them. So they have started on their sustainable journey, and we've been, involved with them in some ways. So they've now taken the big assessment, the GSTC qualification with a consultant. And on top of that, they have also done a calculation, beginning to calculate their carbon footprint. And Ecotourism Bali, my initiative, is helping them to plant mangroves in order to neutralize the carbon emission that they are producing. So they want to take away, I don't know how many, maybe it's like 20-30% of their carbon emissions. And we're helping them by growing mangroves, by having a mangrove project in Bali, so that the benefits also are felt by the Balinese people in the planting of all these mangroves, for instance. That's one instance. And there are other restaurants. I mean, Bali has so many wonderful, sustainable, how do you say, operations like Bamboo Indah, which is totally made from bamboo. There are many more architectural designs now that are made from bamboo, for instance, because they're so sustainable, they're so easy to grow. And people might not know, but concrete or cement is actually partially producing a lot of carbon in the manufacturing. So actually, if you use natural materials such as bamboo, then it's much more sustainable for the construction. So that is a really big plus. And also operations such as Potato Head, for instance. Potato Head is really ahead in this journey on sustainability. They recycle all the plastic that they use, which they have already reduced. What else? All their construction is either with, how do you say, they have lots of bricks and using quite a lot of bamboo and recycled plastic. And their food is sustainably sourced. So they are leaders in sustainability in Bali right now, and this is very encouraging.
It sure sounds like there's a lot of optimism within sustainability, particularly within the tourism industry. And I'm curious about, you mentioned earlier how some communities may benefit from these projects as well, but can you tell me about the role that local communities play in promoting and sustaining sustainability within the tourism industry and for Bali in general?
Well, we really need, how do you say, people in the business to take an active part and work together with communities. So, for instance, in Bali, there's Scholars of Sustenance. It's a community that helps to divert food waste and and they reprocess the food waste. It's not really waste. It's sort of leftover food at the end of the day. They're still good quality. They're all been collected and they're recooked, for instance, and distributed to communities that need them. For instance, that's a very strong move. There is a very strong community doing that in Bali. There's also during the COVID, if you would know, there is Janur, who actually won, I think, some recognition. He was exchanging. If you come in and bring a kilogram of plastic waste, he'll give you a kilogram of rice. It's called the plastic exchange, and it was very successful, especially during COVID. So people were bringing in the villagers, people who'd lost their jobs during the COVID period. They were bringing in their plastic waste in exchange for rice. So these are some of the things that have been happening. And now there's, if you're interested in your honeymoon to go on an eco journey, there's a community-based tourism activities now, quite a bit of them. One of them is called 5 Pillars, where you will be taken out to the community and enjoy the activities in that community. So these are the kinds of things that are happening, so that the benefits of tourism are also filtering into the community.
But obviously that's from the side of the local communities. From the tourist side, how do you think that tourists can be and should be more responsible and conscious of their environmental impact, particularly when visiting Bali? That's the role that I play and the role that my future wife plays when I go there as well.
So I think the first thing is to come prepared with information. Like if you're booking something, if you're planning your trip, the first thing is to decide what kind of visit you'd like to make. I mean, ideally, and it's happening much more often, people are coming with a clear agenda about wanting to do sustainable activities. So then you could look up, how do you say, lodgings that are more sustainable. And in fact, Ecotourism Bali is now part of the scheme with booking.com. Very soon, people who have taken our standards of sustainability will be marked on booking.com, and you can see that. Right now, there is some sustainable data, but they have not been verified. But very soon, we're helping some of the hotels to gain that that recognition. So the first thing is to look for sustainable lodging and activities, and then to make sure that you don't produce too much waste, obviously. To always come prepared with a water bottle, so that you don't have to consume water in the plastic bottles, which eventually becomes waste. And to make sure you have a bag with you, the standard sustainability things. And to ask the guide, for instance, to take you to local types of activities, and interact with the locals, so that how do you say, the money that you spend in Bali goes back to the community. And sometimes you can do volunteering as well, if some people have done that in Bali.
Well, certainly a lot of very useful tips, a lot of useful advice, not only for me, but also for our viewers watching as well. Bu Suzy, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us at Sea today. I certainly had a very eye-opening conversation about the different efforts that are being taken to achieve sustainability in Bali, and hopefully it'll continue to develop in the future as well. Of course, thanks to your efforts too, Bu Suzy. Thank you so much for your time once again.
Thank you.
And that was our conversation with Bu Suzy Hutomo, the co-founder of Ecotourism Bali. Certainly an eye-opening conversation, as I mentioned earlier. Lots of new insights that you can definitely take into account when visiting Bali next. And of course, very interesting to see the development of sustainability in the tourism industry in Bali. That's the end of our interview, but not the end of See the Stories. So we'll be right back after the break, right here on the 3 Hour News Show, only on See Today.